This isn't just a story about baseball. It's about a radical idea that completely transformed a sport and then escaped the stadium to change how all of us think about talent, value, and what it really means to win when the game is rigged against you. This is the story of Moneyball. So, to really get what Moneyball is all about, you first have to see the problem they were up against. And it was huge. Look at this. On the left, that's the entire payroll for every player on the Oakland A's, the whole team. And on the right, that's the contract the New York Yankees gave to just one player, a player they had literally just poached from Oakland. This isn't an unfair fight. It's not even a fight. It's a caste system. And that leads to the central question of the entire book. In a system that's so obviously rigged, where the wealthiest teams can just buy championships, how on earth do you even begin to compete? Well, the answer they came up with was simple. You refuse to play their game. You invent a new one. See, back in the early 2000s, the Oakland A's, one of the poorest teams in baseball, decided the old rulebook was broken. They threw it out and adopted this totally radical, data-driven approach, basically defying 100 years of tradition, all to prove one powerful idea: that brains could actually beat money. But here's the thing. That huge financial gap, it was just a symptom. The real problem was much, much deeper. The whole system was flawed, blinded by a century of tradition. And the perfect embodiment of that flawed system was the story of one single player. For about 100 years, this is what baseball scouts looked for. They called it the eye test. It wasn't about performance. It was really an aesthetic judgment about how a player looked. Did he have that good body, the big arm, a good fastball? All the things that made him look like a can't-miss prospect. They were scouting an ideal, not a result. And here's the twist. That perfect, can't-miss prospect, the guy who was the poster child for everything scouts drooled over, that was Billy Beane, the very same guy who would one day become the general manager of the Oakland A's. By every traditional metric, he was a sure thing, destined for greatness. But the reality of his career told a completely different story. The gap between how he looked and how he actually played was, well, it was brutal. A batting average barely above .200, a staggering number of strikeouts. The eye test hadn't just been wrong, it had failed, spectacularly. And Billy Beane was the living, breathing proof that the system was broken, because he was its perfect victim. Beane later described his playing career with this incredible metaphor. He called himself a reformed alcoholic, because that monumental failure didn't just break him, it gave him this brutal, undeniable clarity. It allowed him to see the flaws in traditional thinking that everyone else was completely blind to, which ironically made him the perfect revolutionary. So his personal reckoning became the catalyst for a quiet revolution. It forced him to hunt for a totally new language for value, an idea so heretical it was like challenging the very religion of baseball. A new way of seeing the game, based not on what players looked like, but on what they actually did to help win. And that new language had a name: sabermetrics. At its core, it was a search for objective knowledge. It was about stripping away all the romance, all the gut feelings, all the tradition, and focusing on one thing: cold, hard data. It was an attempt to find the true engine of winning a baseball game. And this created a fundamental clash of worldviews. On one side, you had the old scouts, who valued subjective things: a good body, a gut feeling. On the other side, you had the numbers, which valued objective, measurable results, like on-base percentage and walks. They weren't just disagreeing, they were speaking two completely different languages about the exact same game. So what did this look like in the real world? Well, take a player named Kevin Youkilis. The traditional scouting report on him was just brutal and dismissive. They basically said he's a fat third baseman who couldn't run, throw, or field. Based on that eye test, he was an immediate write-off. But the data revealed what the scouts' eyes completely missed. At the time, Youkilis had the second highest on-base percentage in all of professional baseball. He was a diamond hidden in plain sight, a classic market inefficiency just sitting there waiting for someone to exploit it. So, armed with this new secret language, Billy Beane didn't go looking for superstars. Nope. He went looking for players just like Youkilis. He was building baseball's very own island of misfit toys, a team assembled from players who were undervalued, overlooked, or just completely written off by everyone else. Paul DePodesta, Beane's assistant, summed up their strategy perfectly. He said,
there has to be something wrong with them for them to get to us. Think about that. They weren't just accepting players with flaws. They were actively seeking them out. They understood that the superficial flaws other teams obsessed over were precisely what made hidden talent affordable.
And the ultimate example of this whole philosophy was a guy named Scott Hatteberg. He was a veteran catcher who suffered a career-threatening injury, nerve damage in his elbow. He simply could not throw a baseball effectively anymore. By every conventional measure, his career was over. But what the A's did with Hatteberg was just brilliant. First, they identified his one elite, undervalued skill, an incredible ability to get on base. Second, they completely ignored his glaring, obvious weakness, the fact that he couldn't play his old position. And third, they just reinvented him as a first baseman. See, they didn't fix his flaw, they just made it irrelevant. This radical approach of assembling a team of misfits didn't just win some games, it created a legacy. The story of that 2002 Oakland A's team became about something so much bigger than just one season of baseball. It all culminated in a single number: 20. 20 consecutive wins, an American League record. An achievement that should have been absolutely impossible for a team built from spare parts and statistical anomalies. But let's ask the question, what did that winning streak really prove? Was it just some lucky run, a statistical fluke? Or did it symbolize something way more profound about the nature of competition itself? The real victory here wasn't the streak. It was the idea. The reason we still talk about Moneyball is because it proves that logic and courage can actually overturn a rigged system. It shows the incredible power of finding better ways to measure what truly matters, of questioning the way things have always been done. And maybe most importantly, it reveals that true value is so often hidden right behind our own flawed perceptions. And this is where the Moneyball method becomes this powerful framework for our own lives. In your decisions, it teaches you to separate the signal from the noise. In your career, it pushes you to focus on your unique, measurable strengths, not just the ones that look good on paper. As an investor, it's about looking for the undervalued assets the market ignores. And as an ambitious person, it's about competing where other people aren't even looking. Ultimately, the book leaves us with this single resonant insight. What begins as a failure of the imagination ends as a market inefficiency. It's a powerful reminder that the biggest opportunities aren't found in what everyone else can see, but in the blind spots of conventional wisdom.